I want you to imagine a scenario. You are stepping out of your front door and, well, the air just hits you like a physical wall.
Oh, yeah, that classic summer wall.
Right. It is mid-June, and the very first 96-degree day of the year has just arrived. You're sweating before you even reach your car.
Exactly.
And in that moment of, sweltering realization, a thought pops into your head. You completely forgot to service your home's air conditioner this spring.
Oh, man, that is a feeling of just pure cold dread, or I guess in this case, hot dread.
Total panic.
No.
So you rush back inside, you pick up your phone, and you call a highly rated local business. Let's say, for example, it's Hartzell's Heat and Air down in Kingfisher, Oklahoma.
Okay, sure.
You get the owner on the line, and you tell him you want to book that $229 preventative tune-up you saw advertised a few months ago. You have your credit card out. You are happily willing to pay the fee today.
Makes sense.
But the owner on the other end of the line tells you absolutely not. He will not take your money.
Which, I mean, from a consumer perspective, that sounds completely backwards. You are actively offering a business money for a service they literally advertise, and they are flatly refusing to show up.
It sounds like a terrible way to run a business, honestly. But today, we are taking a deep dive into the operational notes of Dave Hartzell, who is a master HVAC technician with 45 years of field experience in Oklahoma.
Yeah, 35 years is a lot of summers.
Right. And his notes explain exactly why turning away your money in June is actually the most scientifically sound business decision he can make.
It really is fascinating.
Our mission for this deep dive is to figure out exactly why paying for a summer air conditioning tune-up is a terrible idea, what you are actually paying for when you buy a tune-up, and how the temperature outside drastically changes the underlying physics of your home's cooling system. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, to understand why a technician cannot perform a reliable tune-up in the dead of summer, we first have to fundamentally change how we think about the tune-up itself. Because, there is a massive misconception among homeowners about what that $229 is actually buying.
I will admit, I have always viewed an AC tune-up like taking a car through a car wash.
Right, a lot of people do.
You pay a guy to come out, he sprays down the outdoor metal coils with a hose, he swaps out the dirty cardboard filter in your hallway, maybe pats the unit on the side, and says, you're good to go. It feels like a very superficial cleaning.
Well, if that were true, you could do it in any weather. I mean, you could run a car through a car wash when it's 100 degrees out. But a real professional tune-up is not a car wash.
It's not.
No, it is much closer to a comprehensive medical physical for your equipment. It is a strict diagnostic procedure, and it has to be performed while the system is running under a heavy mechanical load.
Okay, so definitely not just a wash and go. I am looking at these notes, and the physical involves about 18 specific measurements. It says they measure the superheat and subcooling of the refrigerant. I'm guessing that just means they check how hot the air is getting.
Actually, no. It is measuring the thermal behavior of the refrigerant inside the sealed pipes.
Oh, the refrigerant itself.
Right. The technician is checking exactly how much heat the liquid refrigerant is absorbing from inside your house, and then how effectively it is releasing that heat outside. And every single one of these 18 measurements must be written down and compared against the manufacturer's rated values.
Wow, so it's very precise.
Highly precise. They check the amperage draw on the compressors and the fan motors just to see how hard the electrical components are working.
I see here they test the capacitor microfarads too. Now, I always assumed a capacitor was basically just like a big battery that stores power for the unit.
A lot of people think that, yeah.
Yeah.
But it functions more like a defibrillator.
A defibrillator.
Yeah, it delivers a massive instantaneous adrenaline shot of electricity to jumpstart those heavy motors every single time the AC cycles on.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
Yeah, and if the microfarads drop, the motor struggles to start, which causes serious long-term damage. So the technician tests that capacitor under load to make sure it still has that knockout punch. They also open up the unit to physically inspect the contactor for pitting.
Pitting, meaning the metal is physically wearing away. How did that even happen just from running an air conditioner?
Well, think about the contactor like a heavy-duty industrial light switch. Every single time your thermostat calls for cooling, a massive surge of electricity jumps across a tiny gap before the metal pieces physically snap together.
Okay.
That jump creates a miniature lightning bolt, basically an electrical arc. And over thousands of cycles, those tiny lightning bolts literally burn away the metal.
That sounds intense.
It is. The technician is looking for that pitted metal before it welds itself permanently shut.
Right, and they are also verifying the static pressure across the air handler inside, checking the temperature split, inspecting the condensate drain and the float switch so water can safely escape.
Exactly.
When you lay out all the physics and electrical audits, it becomes really clear that the real value of that $229 fee isn't just having clean coils. You are paying for a highly sophisticated early warning system.
Yes. You are paying a professional to catch a worn contactor in April rather than having it weld itself shut and leave you stranded without AC during a heat wave in July.
Right, that makes total sense.
You want them to clear a clogged condensate drain before it overflows, destroys your ceiling, and just ruins your drywall.
But wait, wouldn't a stress test in peak heat be the absolute best time to see if a system is struggling? Like, if I want to know if my AC can handle a 100-degree day, the most logical thing in the world is to test it on a 100-degree day. If it passes then, I know I am safe.
You would think so, right? But what's fascinating here is that extreme heat doesn't just stress the air conditioner, it actually breaks the tools used to measure it.
It breaks the tools.
Yeah, the entire concept of a stress test falls apart when you look at the physics of the refrigerants that make cooling possible.
Okay, break down the physics for me. Why do the technician's tools stop working just because it's hot outside?
Well, the single most important thing a technician does during that physical is verify your refrigerant charge. Like, is there enough chemical refrigerant inside the closed loop to physically carry the heat out of your house?
Because an improper charge is the #1 reason an air conditioner underperforms, right?
Exactly.
Right.
And to verify the charge, the technician relies on specific charging charts provided by the manufacturer. But those charts are mathematically calculated for moderate weather windows.
Ah, so they assume a baseline environment. The notes say the outdoor temperature needs to be somewhere between 75 and 90 degrees, and the indoor return air should be a stable 75 to 80 degrees.
Right. Under those moderate conditions, the technician can look at their gauges, check the superheat and subcooling, and know with pinpoint accuracy what is happening inside the sealed system. The physics behave predictably.
But when it hits 95 or 100 degrees outside, the system starts running at its absolute maximum capacity.
Yes.
The head pressure, which is the pressure of the hot refrigerant gas being compressed, skyrockets. The entire system is just redlining to keep up with the heat of the sun. And because of that extreme pressure, those manufacturer diagnostic charts literally run out of room.
Exactly. The gauges are pinned at the top. The diagnostic window completely vanishes.
That is like trying to weigh a 10-pound bag of flour on a kitchen scale that only goes up to 5 pounds.
Yes, great analogy.
The needle slams all the way to the right, and it stops moving. You have absolutely no idea if you were holding 6 pounds of flour or 15 pounds of flour because the tool itself has maxed out.
That analogy perfectly captures the danger here. Dave's notes actually highlight a critical metric about this exact scenario.
Oh, what is it?
If a technician tests your system on a mild 80-degree day, a 5% undercharge of refrigerant is glaringly obvious on their gauges. They spot it instantly, top off the system, and fix the underlying leak.
Okay, but what if it's hotter?
Well, if they test that exact same system on a 100-degree day, that 5% undercharge looks mathematically identical to a perfect 100% charge.
Yeah, really? Identical.
Identical. The extreme ambient heat artificially inflates the pressures, completely masking the problem.
So you could have a system quietly starving for refrigerant, but because the weather is so hot, the gauges are screaming that everything is totally fine.
Exactly.
That creates a massive diagnostic blind spot. Paying a company $229 to take measurements inside a blind spot isn't just a waste of money, it's a false sense of security.
And it leads directly to catastrophic failures.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Dave Hartzell's notes include a cautionary tale about this exact blind spot. It is a real-world disaster scenario from years ago, back before he instituted his strict operational rule against summer tune-ups.
Ah, yes, the infamous 102-degree July day.
Yes. Years ago, DIT had a customer who was absolutely adamant about getting a preventative tune-up in the middle of July, and it was 102 degrees outside.
Just brutal heat.
Right. And Dave, wanting to provide good customer service and keep the client happy, gave in against his better judgment. He drove out to the house, ran the full 18-point diagnostic, and took all the measurements.
But the gauges were maxed out.
Exactly. Based on the limited accuracy his pinned gauges could provide in that brutal heat, everything looked fine. He packed up his tools and gave the system a clean bill of health.
And the customer handed over the $229, thinking they had just bought total peace of mind for the rest of the summer.
But 3 weeks later, That exact same system completely died. The compressor, the massive pump that acts as the absolute heart of the air conditioner, just cooked itself to death. We are talking thousands and thousands of dollars to replace.
Which is just awful. And the tragedy of the situation is that the refrigerant charge had actually been dangerously low the entire time.
Right. Because Dave took the measurements on a 102-degree day, his maxed out gauges could not resolve the low charge against that massive head pressure. The compressor had been running starved of refrigerant, straining against incredibly high pressures for weeks, until the internal windings just gave up and melted down.
That homeowner paid the initial fee thinking they were protected, and then immediately had to finance a new compressor.
It's terrible.
Dave notes that if he had simply refused the job and told them to wait until October when the weather cooled down, that fall tune-up would have caught the low refrigerant in 20 minutes.
And the compressor would have been saved.
Exactly. That single expensive mistake is why he categorically refuses to bend the rules today.
It is a painful lesson in physics. And looking through the rest of the 18-point checklist, it isn't just the refrigerant gauges that become useless in extreme heat. The airflow measurements suffer from a very similar illusion.
They really do.
But air is just air, right? Why would hot weather ruin an airflow reading?
Well, from a thermodynamic standpoint, air changes drastically depending on the weather. Part of the diagnostic is checking the static pressure across the indoor air handler to ensure your ductwork isn't restricted. In peak summer heat, the hot air inside an attic or a poorly insulated space is physically less dense. Add to that the fact that your blower motor is running flat out, continuously, without cycling off.
Because it's trying to keep up.
Right. And because of the density change and the constant high-speed operation, the static pressure readings begin to drift. The precision just vanishes.
So the data telling you whether your ducts are healthy becomes entirely untrustworthy.
Furthermore, there is a crucial airflow metric called the temperature split. This is the difference in temperature between the warm air being pulled into your return vents and the cold air blowing out of your supply vents.
That makes sense.
It is the quickest way to gut check if a system is actually removing heat from the house. In moderate weather, you want to see a split of about 18 to 22 degrees. If the air goes into the vent at 75 degrees, it should come out of the register around 55 degrees.
And seeing that 20-degree drop tells the technician the system is breathing easily and doing its job perfectly. But what changes when it is 100 degrees outside?
You have to factor in the high humidity that almost always accompanies a 100-degree day in places like Oklahoma. The air conditioner is suddenly dealing with a massive amount of moisture in the air, not just the raw heat. This is known as the latent load.
Let me see if I can picture this. It's like the difference between running 3 miles in the dry heat of an Arizona desert versus running 3 miles through a humid Florida swamp.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
In the swamp, the heavy, wet air exhausts you completely differently, even though the distance you ran is exactly the same. The air conditioner is basically experiencing swamp fatigue.
That is exactly the mechanism at play. The system is forced to spend a massive amount of its cooling energy just wringing the physical water out of the air before it can even begin to lower the actual temperature of the room.
Wow, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, because overcoming that latent load dominates the mechanical process, the temperature split naturally compresses. Instead of a healthy 20-degree drop, it might drop to only a 14 or 15-degree difference.
So a system that is functioning perfectly fine, doing exactly what it was engineered to do, suddenly looks marginal on paper. It looks like it is failing, but it's only because of the heavy, wet air it is forced to breathe on that specific afternoon.
Exactly. A technician looking at that compressed split on a humid day might mistakenly think there's a duct restriction or a failing blower motor, when in reality, it's just the weather. You end up chasing diagnostic ghosts and potentially recommending repairs that the homeowner does not even need.
We have clearly established that a preventative tune-up in 95-degree heat is a scientific impossibility. The refrigerant gauges max out and hide leaks, the static pressure drifts, and the temperature split compresses, creating false alarms.
Correct.
But let's bring this back to reality. What if you are the person sweating in your house in June? You realize you missed the spring maintenance window, and your anxiety is skyrocketing. You are terrified your system is going to break. What are your actual actionable options?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the first step is understanding the difference between the two types of HVAC visits. There is a service call, and there is a preventative tune-up. They're entirely different jobs with completely different parameters.
Right. A service call is reactive. You pick up the phone when a specific component is already broken. The air conditioner is blowing warm air, water is actively dripping through your ceiling drywall, or the electrical breaker keeps tripping in the garage.
Exactly. The technician comes out to diagnose that specific acute failure, replace the broken part, and get the cold air flowing again. Because the problem is already highly symptomatic, a service call can be performed in absolutely any weather.
So the weather doesn't matter for a repair.
Right. If it is 105 degrees outside and your dual capacitor is blown, they can easily locate the swollen part, replace it, and leave.
But a tune-up is proactive. You are actively hunting for problems that have not become symptoms yet. You are trying to establish a highly accurate baseline of mechanical health.
And as we just proved, with the physics of head pressure and latent load, you can only establish a scientific baseline in moderate weather.
So if you miss the moderate weather, what do you do?
Well, you have three distinct alternatives. Option one is simply to wait for the shoulder seasons.
Meaning the periods of transition between extreme hot and extreme cold.
Yes. In central Oklahoma, where Hartzell operates, there are two ideal windows for this kind of precise diagnostic work. The spring window is roughly mid-March through early May. The fall window is mid-September through early November.
That is essentially only 2 7-week windows out of the entire year.
It is. But during those specific weeks, the outdoor temperatures reliably sit between 60 and 85 degrees. The indoor temperatures are stable, and the equipment can be tested accurately without the gauges being slammed by extreme head pressure.
Makes sense.
If you call in June, the smartest move is to just wait until October. If your system is run fine all winter and spring, the odds are heavily in your favor that it will survive the summer without intervention.
Okay, but let's say I am someone who just cannot wait until October. My anxiety about the AC breaking is keeping me up at night, and I absolutely need a professional to look at it right now.
Then you go with option two, the dispatch check.
How is a dispatch check different from the $229 tune-up? Are they just coming out to kick the tires?
It is a scaled-down, realistic visit. In Hartzell's case, it costs $99. The technician will come out for about 30 minutes. Crucially, they are not hooking up the refrigerant gauges or taking the full 18-point diagnostic measurements because they know those numbers would be mathematically useless in the heat anyway.
Right, the blind spot.
Exactly. Instead, they perform a visual and basic mechanical inspection to catch the low-hanging fruit.
They eyeball the system for obvious oil leaks or physical damage. They change your indoor filter. They test the electrical capacitor under load to make sure it still has that defibrillator punch, which is vital since weak capacitors cause a massive percentage of summer breakdowns.
Yes, they do all of that.
And if your outdoor condenser coil is visibly choked with cottonwood or grass clippings, they wash it off. And they verify the thermostat is communicating properly with the board.
It catches the obvious catastrophic threats to give you peace of mind. It is not a true preventative tune-up, but it is a responsible, ethical compromise when you are in the middle of a heat wave and need a professional set of eyes on your equipment.
Okay, so we have waiting for the shoulder seasons or getting the $99 dispatch check. What is the third option?
Option three is designed for people who know they're always going to forget to call in March. It is the comprehensive maintenance plan.
Putting your home's infrastructure on autopilot.
Exactly. Hartzell offers a plan called Dave's 360 for $360 a year. What this does is fundamentally remove the burden of timing from the homeowner's shoulders.
How so?
When you enroll in the plan, the HVAC company tracks the weather for you. When that brief 7-week shoulder season opens up in the spring and the temperatures hit 75 degrees, their office calls you and books your tune-up. When the fall window opens, they call you again.
Oh, that aligns the financial incentive of the business directly with the scientific reality of the equipment.
It really does.
Plus, looking at the math, paying for a spring and fall tune-up completely out of pocket would normally run you $458 retail. The plan is $360. They are giving you a substantial discount simply to let them schedule the work when the physics actually allow their technicians to do the job correctly.
It guarantees you get accurate diagnostics, and it smooths out their scheduling outside of the chaotic summer rush. It's a win-win.
So what does this all mean? When we zoom out and look at this entire deep dive, the ultimate takeaway is that an air conditioning tune-up is not a static commodity. You aren't just buying an hour of a technician's time. A tune-up performed at 95 degrees is fundamentally, scientifically not the same job as a tune-up performed at 75 degrees.
Right. The environmental conditions literally dictate the accuracy of the science.
When an honest technician tells you to keep your money and wait until October, they aren't brushing you off. They aren't just being difficult about their busy schedule. They are enforcing a strict requirement for scientific accuracy.
Absolutely.
They know that extreme heat creates a massive diagnostic blind spot, and they refuse to charge you $229 to look at a set of gauges that are actively lying to them.
It is a profound shift from thinking of home maintenance as a simple checklist convenience to understanding it as a precise diagnostic science.
I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder today. Think about all the other vital systems in your life that require regular maintenance: your car, your physical health, the infrastructure of your home.
Oh, that's a great point.
How many of those vital routines are you scheduling under the absolute worst possible stress test conditions, simply because a sudden seasonal change or a moment of panic reminded you it was time? Are you demanding diagnostics when your systems are redlining and exhausted, rather than stepping back and scheduling them when the measurements would actually be the most accurate?
It is a critical question worth asking across the board.
Sometimes the most responsible thing you can do when you feel that sudden panic on the first 96-degree day of summer is just change your own air filter. Take a deep breath and set a reminder on your calendar for October. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Stay cool out there.